It's Margot, and today I'm bringing you the real-life holiday horror story of Michael Merhige, the Thanksgiving Day Killer. If you think you've got awful family members that ruin perfectly good holidays, just wait until you hear about this one. If you're ready to get spooked and spine tingled, keep watching. On November 26, 2009 in Jupiter, Florida, 35-year-old Paul Michael Merhige was seemingly enjoying Thanksgiving dinner at his cousin's home in an upscale gated community, with 16 of his family members and friends, all conversing and joking throughout the meal. After clearing the table, the family gathered around the piano to sing Christmas songs. There were no arguments, no tension, no reason to think anyone wasn't having a good time. The get-together had been going on for 3 pleasant hours. Marriage had seemed calm and relaxed all evening, but while the rest of the dinner guests continued to sing, Marriage went to his car and grabbed a handgun. He then went back inside the house and executed his 33-year-old twin sisters, Carla Marriage, a real estate agent, and Lisa Knight, who was pregnant. Next, he fatally turned the gun on his 76-year-old aunt, Raymond Joseph. Then he ended his rampage by shooting and killing the dinner hosts Muriel and Jim Sitton's 6-year-old daughter, Michaela, who was actually in her bed asleep at the time. Earlier in the evening, little Michaela had written on cards how thankful she was for her family and performed some songs from the Nutcracker, a recital she was supposed to be in the next day. Michaela died just days before her 7th birthday. Mr. Sitton has said that he didn't even know which family member had invited Marriage to his house that day. He wasn't on the guest list. He'd only met Marriage twice and hadn't seen him in more than a decade. He said Marriage had been on the fringe of the family and hadn't been seen much over the years. Other Thanksgiving gifts were injured. Lisa Knight's husband, Patrick, was shot in the stomach and spent 3 months in a medically induced coma before waking to find that his wife and unborn baby were dead. And another man, 52-year-old Clifford Gabera, was grazed by a bullet. Marriage had actually tried twice to shoot his uncle as well, but the gun wouldn't fire. Afterward, Marriage's family quotes him as saying, "I've waited 20 years to do this," before fleeing the scene. Marriage was on the run for 38 days. When police managed to catch up with him in the Florida Keys on January 2, 2010, he'd shaved his head and put fake license plates on his car. He was finally arrested and charged after being recognized by the owners of the Edgewater Lodge Motel on Long Key when his face was featured on America's Most Wanted. Marriage claimed he'd run away to end his own life. Marriage's parents, Michael and Carol, who'd financially supported him his whole life, refused to pay for a private defense attorney, leaving him with a public defender. According to Marriage's mother, he'd been an honor student and varsity athlete at a pricey Miami prep school, where he graduated third in his class before attending the University of Miami. In fact, donating his entire senior page in his high school yearbook to his family, Marriage wrote, "To all 32 members of his family, I love you now and will forever." He also wrote, "I have been so lucky to be blessed with having twin sisters and being your protective older brother." But after graduating, something drastically changed. Marriage never held a job, remaining financially reliant on his parents. The family vaguely alluded to his going through a nervous breakdown at age 19 that changed his life. Marriage's high school classmates have said 35-year-old Paul Marriage was a completely different person than the likable, high-achieving teenager they knew. His mother also said Marriage had a history of mental illness, including obsessive-compulsive disorder and chronic depression. She claimed he'd once shot himself in an attempt to end his life and had once threatened to cut the throat of one of his sisters. Court documents show that Marriage did have a messy history with his sisters. Nearly a decade before the murders, Marriage had sought protection from law enforcement, claiming his sister had tried to kill him. He dropped the request a few days later. In 2006, Carla Marriage requested a restraining order against her brother, claiming he'd threatened to kill her and himself, but she withdrew the request a few weeks later. Sadly, this family had a tragic history predating Marriage's murder spree. His aunt had killed her husband and her 2 children, and then herself, in the 1970s. It's been speculated there may have been a genetic component to this. It was thought that Marriage's attorney would try for an insanity defense, but authorities said he'd meticulously planned the killings and his escape. buying 4 guns, packing clothes, and withdrawing at least $12,000 in cash. He hid out in the Keys during a nationwide manhunt for him, swapping out the license plate on his car and keeping it covered in the motel parking lot. When he was caught, it was apparent he'd been following the manhunt on the internet. He knew exactly what he was doing. Merhige was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences after taking a plea deal to avoid the death penalty for the 4 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of attempted first-degree murder he'd been charged with. Michael and Carol Merhige were sued by both the Sittons and Patrick Knight, accused of knowing that their son's behavior was becoming increasingly dangerous and that he had stopped taking psychotropic medication and exposing the rest of the family to danger. The elder Merhiges didn't tell anyone their son was coming to Thanksgiving dinner until just before he arrived. In an email to one relative prior to Thanksgiving dinner, Carol wrote, "Everyone is going up, including Paul. It will be interesting, to say the least." Paul Michael Merhige is now known as the Thanksgiving Day Killer. That's all I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this story and will come back for more. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and bring your friends, family, COVID pod, cult members, invisible friends, and enemies. And if you have a horrible Thanksgiving story you'd like to share, hopefully not nearly as bad as this one, leave it in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching.